My microphone there. We're going to actually move to the panel discussion. So if Bob and Dan and Mike and Elizabeth, if you guys will all come back up here. Again, everyone's bio is in your program except for Bob's. And so I'm going to do a little introduction of Bob Schwartzwalder for you. Bob's the Associate University Librarian and the Director of Library Technologies at Stanford. He's served on advisory boards for several publishers and has participated in a variety of national and international projects to create effective digital information systems. He was recently named to the board of Digital Preservation Network, a national consortium to ensure the preservation of the scholarly record, and he's my boss.
Okay, I'm on. Oh, thank you. I think we can. This we're going to share amongst the panel. Okay. Well, good morning. My name is Tom Baer, and I'm the director of the Stanford Photonics Research Center, one of the co-sponsors of this particular event. I'd like to welcome all of you, and also in particular welcome our guests from UCSF and University of California at Berkeley. I think we should be doing more of these Bay Area events in the future. This starts another segment of what we were planning to do today, which was incorporate an audience response system, because some of the speakers here and participants, particularly Myron Gutman, had asked us to survey people who were in attendance to get some feedback to them on different questions that they felt would be useful to ask this audience. So we're going to combine this with a panel discussion. You'll find these at your seats. This is not conference swag, so please don't take this home for your kids. This is an audience response system, and like all digital systems, it's subject to some technical issues at times. This event forum was co-organized with a bunch of librarians, so we do have paper backup copies to the digital system, and we will use these the paper backup if the digital system does not function as we hope it will be able to. So the format that we're going to follow is that we're going to ask you to enter some demographic data. I assure you this will be completely anonymous, and it won't be traceable to any of you personally, not even by the NSA, though I do say please turn off your cell phones. Just kidding on that. We are going to post a series of questions, and you will be given a little bit of time to discuss it at your tables if you'd like, and then enter your answers to those questions. Then we're going to ask the panel members to do basically a very pithy one-sentence comment on how they feel this question should be dealt with. And then we'll move on to some of the other questions, and then we're going to open it up for general Q&A. So we'll see how this goes. We're going to start with just some of the demographic questions, because then we can do some histograms on some of the answers. So do you want to go ahead?
So first, if everybody could hit the channel button, make sure it says 4-1.
It's the lower left-hand button, and they should all say 4-1. Go ahead. Pardon me? That's okay. That's okay.
Okay. Let's see.
Okay, so the first question is, what is your affiliation? Well, it looks like that's actually working. Okay. And you can change your answer, but we'll only let you record one. So we'll take the last. So if you make a mistake on any of these, you can change your answer, but it will only let you vote once. Okay, why don't we go on to, that looks like that.
Fifth Amendment option on
No, you cannot answer. That's your Fifth Amendment option.
It's closed now.
Okay, so we're closed at this point. So this gives you an idea of the demographics of who is here. Go ahead. Then we're very interested to know what your major focus is here in terms of these different, what discipline do you identify with? Life sciences, medicine, physical sciences, humanities, engineering. Again, if none of these apply, you can either pick one or not vote.
Yeah, I guess for the biggest one, it's going to be.
Can you open it?
I think that's under humanity.
Yeah.
Humanities, social science.
Yeah, we missed the humanities. Sorry about that.
Misuse social science.
Well, that mathematical.
It's data. That's data analysis.
Okay. Okay. So that one's working.
Okay.
Try it. Well, we may be going to hard copy and.
Okay, let's try again, but
Okay.
it's not showing.
Okay. Okay. So, do
Well, we'll just, okay.
you want to try? Go to the next one.
People are still responding.
Oh, but it's okay. It is responding. You just can't see it on the.
It might record it now.
Okay. So, we have technical difficulties. No question. We can't see the histogram here. There it is. No, it is. Okay. So that's the demographics of people by discipline, and I apologize for those disciplines that didn't make it to the short list. It shows a little bit of bias as a physicist here. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. So the next question is, what percentage of research grant funds should be assigned to page charges or publication costs? So just in a theoretical model, what do you think would be the appropriate portion of research grants? Yes?
For page charges, do you mean leading to open access, or
Yeah,
do you
leading
mean
to open access.
not like the old style page charges?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you want to?
Exactly.
Okay.
Or it depends.
Are there specific questions about?
Just keep clicking one and then the other.
Like more than 10%, or what about it depends on other factors?
Oh.
A little hard to put that last one. We could be more than 10%, but I didn't expect anyone would. I expected that one would be.
Yeah, you're biased. They're biased.
Well, yeah.
Right, you
fully
could have a system in which the funded charges don't go through page charges versus one which they do. It depends on it.
1%.
Okay, so why don't we open it up for a one-sentence comment? Bob, do you want to start?
Yeah, I ask in our lab, which does $20 million a year of research, what we actually spend and how much we budget. And we budget a little less than 1% for our grants for publication, and we actually spend about 1.5%. So those are numbers from a real live lab that does publications on a normal way.
Mm-hmm. Joe?
Well, my view goes back to my comments about inappropriate generalizations, and I do not have an opinion on this question for that reason.
My concern here is that, in a sense, when you really base a system on page charges, then you exclude people who can't afford them. And I remember as a graduate student being in that position, so I'm concerned about this model.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say my lab currently spends about 3% of our budget, although because it's an HHMI lab, we don't spend it actually from our budget, but that's the way it costs. I mean, I think that it's important to know that this is just one model for, this microphone's not even on.
Yeah.
This is just one model for how to do it, and if you were going to do it through page charges, then I think it should be somewhere around 1%, but it's certainly not the only way to do it.
I think it's certainly something that's important, but to be considered in addition to lots of other options available to authors.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to have no opinion on this. It's down to the individual grant receivers and authors and the status of the field, et cetera, and the absolute levels involved.
I want to go to the next question. So the next question follows along this theme: is what percentage do you currently spend on paid charges? And again, if it's not applicable, you can just do no opinion. What? Yeah.
All right, let's fix that one in a hurry.
So do you have total numbers there or just percents? So what is the total number of votes on that one? So 94 people responded, so it gives you an idea of what the statistics are. And they're probably statistically significant there, given that there's still on the order of a little bit over 30% that were able to respond. So it looks like less than 1% is it looks like the average. Any comments from the panel on that?
Probably the biggest factor is how much do you actually spend on open access? Like what fraction of your research is published in this way, right? If you're just publishing it all in.
Okay, why don't you go on? And this question is, who should own the copyright to a published manuscript? And the choices are authors, the author's institution, funding agency, the publisher, the federal government, and should be put in public domain. And by own the copyright is even if the authors own it, if they assign all the rights to an agency, I would say then pick the agency or publisher, then you should say the agency or publisher, not the author. So where are we? Okay, we've got just about everybody responding. Comments? Do you want to start, Dan?
Yeah, I answered A, the author, because I think just there are so many scenarios here in play, and like Michael said, if you could start from scratch, how would you have? So it being a completely hypothetical question, I think that would be the most ideal answer.
I think it depends on what happens with the content and who's adding value to it.
I mean, I think it should be in the public domain. I mean, I think that you know, it's nice to have it in the hands of the authors, but it's as impractical or less practical than it is to have it in the hands of publishers, because if you had to ask every author whose work you wanted to use for any other purpose, it's you go crazy. So you have to have the rights be effectively in the public domain, whether that's done by actually literally placing the copyright in the public domain, which is legally tricky in some sense, or using a license like Creative Commons license to effectively put it there. I think it's the only practical way to enable reuse.
Open access. Yeah.
I think copyright is a blunt tool. It really needs to be totally reevaluated. There should be certain non-exclusive rights that various stakeholders have, and so the authors certainly should have predominant rights, but there should be some non-commercial rights assigned to other people who help fund the research, help develop the research. So I think it needs to be more complex than this.
I guess, surprisingly, I'm close to agreeing with Michael on this. I mean, I will say, I think you don't want to build something that's just terribly clumsy, and so there are efficient ways to do that. And public domain is one, CC BY is probably close to another one, and something like that.
As a faculty member, I would agree. You have to keep this something that can actually be done, so that copyright has to go to the publisher or public domain.
Very good. Move on. Okay, this is the similar sort of question, but now to source data that might be coupled to a manuscript. This kind of bleeds over to the afternoon's discussion, but once again, it's basically the same set of institutions or people who could own the source data.
Are we assuming this is federally funded research?
All of this, yes, federally funded. This is what relevant to the OSTP memo. We get to 99.
So I think you meant ownership of source data. There isn't copyright on source data.
If it gets published in a text form, I don't know.
The data itself isn't copyright, but the representation of it. So it really is an ownership rather than copyright issue.
Okay. I'm not sure.
Like actual source data, using the word source implies that there's no copyright uses raw facts and so on. And this is much more open than, say, written text.
I didn't know how to capture the idea that there would be intellectual property as a part of the manuscript process other than that would be representative of the source data other than to call it a copyright. I don't. Okay. Is there an ownership, a legal system that covers that? This is interesting.
It's actually blurry. So the Supreme Court says original selection and arrangement of data can have copyright adhered to it. What that means in a scientific context is not at all clear.
Okay.
But the raw facts themselves are not copyright.
Okay.
Unless they're CDM.
Well, this is quite interesting. Any comments?
I think the same basic principles should apply here that in all these cases. It's nice that we have a much more open attitude towards data traditionally, but probably there's some publishers who wish that they had somehow enclosed data back before it started to get it'd be very valuable to, for example, have genome sequence data controlled by the publishers and so forth. It's an accident of history that's not the case.
Yeah, I would agree with the majority here that the data produced with federal funds should be open access, but I think it's really important to provide the researcher with a certain period of time to do first publication, and that's a critical element that needs to be represented.
Okay.
No, I would just agree with that as well. I mean, I think that's a real serious issue.
So
I don't know how to do it, but you know.
Okay. You want to go on to the next one? A little bit more generally stated, there's no copyright stated here, but who should own the intellectual property developed by an inventor from open access data sets?
This is an inventor funded by public.
All of this is federally funded research, and I think we'll keep it that, not blended, just federally funded research.
So, Tom, Bayh-Dole Act already has made that assignment a reality, right? The institution owns any of the patent rights on the data, even federally funded data, as long as it's used to find its way into a useful public domain.
And even if somebody else isn't the inventor, that's not a part of the institution?
Public law applies, and public law takes into account if others contribute to the invention, yes.
Any other comments from the panel on that one? Okay.
This is probably just dependent on what you answered in the previous question as well. And it probably is dependent on what one considers. In certain scientific fields, data is more seen as truth that you happen to come across, and in other fields, experimental data is dependent on your own kind of personality or theories and stuff. So, but I do believe the inventor in the public domain.
I say that. I mean, the authors are probably the worst people to put it in charge of here, again, for the same reason that the authors are just the worst people to be in a position to negotiate how the intellectual property should be used. Either somebody who has capacity to deal with it properly, it has to be able to use it, or you put it in the public domain, which I still think is the best sort here. But in most of these cases, the idea of empowering authors to own their copyright, to own their intellectual property, no more advances the interests of the public than it does if you have it in the hands of publishers or institutions.
Really, the question here is, if the inventor is not an author, who has the rights to that intellectual property?
Okay. So, they said that no one should have it anyway, so it's easy, right? So it should be in the public.
So no patents should come out of publicly available.
Absolutely none, zero.
None. Okay. Not a surprising one. So those are the questions for this morning. Oh, no, I'm sorry, there's one left. What is a suitable embargo time prior to making subscription-only manuscripts available for open access?
Did you turn the mic on? I don't think so.
Thanks. Actually, it was off. Okay, yeah, because I saw that. We done? Interesting. So I think we're going to close the polling. Comments?
Again, at the risk of inappropriate generalization, but I'll just say that APS has had no embargoes, and we've lived okay with that, and
my affiliation.
we're happy to continue that way. So.
As one of the neutral parties at the table, I'll say, your point, Michael, about not needing publishers, I think in a technical sense that may be correct, but publishers occupy a position of trust, and the peer review process, well, no. What's important really is to have a system that works, and my concern is that an embargo period does create sort of a window of opportunity for publishers to make money, which is really important to perpetuate that model. I think that model does serve a good purpose right now. I would argue about the implementation of how it works, but I think that this is a model that does give us a little bit of both worlds of open access, but with a profit margin for publishers.
Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously, I think that you could have both of those things without having an embargo, first of all. And I think that the real problem I have with the idea that we need embargoes is it's not particularly imaginative view for us to have, right? Like, we should set a principle that we want to have this stuff available freely, and then we're all smart, talented people out here. We can figure out a way to make that work and still have people make money for the things that they do. We're too willing to just give in to the system as we have it today and let that happen. So, anyway, I should also say, I think the answer here should be -9 months, which is the amount of time we currently sit on papers before they're even published to go into.
Yeah. Any other comments? Dan?
As I say, a hypothetical answer to a hypothetical question, I would say yes, 0 is the ultimate aim for this, or -9 as Michael would put it. We play the cards that we're holding right now, which is why people have embargo periods, and when thinking changes that, and when we figure out a way, whether people believe we're there already or whether we will get there soon, 0 or -9 is the ideal. So yes.
What we can do is just show you by affiliation what those answers were. So which one is this?
This is everybody.
Okay, this is everybody. Faculty, that's what the faculty numbers look like. No, go down. Librarians.
Go librarian.
Academic staff. That's government. There's just a couple of people here from the government. These are some of the students that are here. And then finally, the one you've been all waiting for, this is what the publishers think. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Private company. Okay, fine. That sounds good. We can go back. So at this point, I think we can open it up for general Q&A. Let's see, do we have? I'm going to steal this mic. Can you guys?
Sorry, I'm going to pick on somebody new.
Also someone who at least needs a microphone. I actually wanted to comment on Michael Eisen's last point, which I think in many ways is the most important one, that the basic problem is relying on where things are published and how many papers are published in order to make one's judgments about hiring decisions and grants and so on. And so it seems that one really has to start with trying to deal with that. One can make the argument, as Michael Turner did, that one thinks that the peer review parts are important, but I don't think one can make the argument that the peer review of all papers that authors or the scientists put up are important. And so somehow trying to find a way to balance having a large number of things that come up right away and are completely open access from the beginning with some things, a rather modest number, that may be reviewed by some process which has to be worked out.
I'll say it's one of the things that I think is actually starting to happen is the +1 was one of the plays in this, and a lot of Archive has been doing this to some extent. Is people switching away from the notion that we explicitly couple that we use a journal title as the way in which we record the results of an assessment, and it's an archaic way of doing things. It's not that the process of assessing works isn't valuable. It's incredibly valuable when people read a paper and decide what's good and bad about it and what's important and who should read it. But we just have this really very non-internet way of recording that assessment. It's like if Amazon had, instead of having 5-star ranks on its papers, it had, you put things into 10,000 different categories. This is, a particularly good example of a battery that would go into a flashlight that shines a particular color. Right? It's just, that's the way we have the system today, and I think it's screaming for reinvention of the way that we evaluate and record the evaluation of works. And there are a bunch of things that are happening out there that are starting to touch on this, although none of them have yet gained any real traction.
I mean, I don't disagree with the sentiment underlying that, but I think I want to emphasize that I don't think there's a really, proven alternative. And it's you think you're just going to put things up and get comments, and I know you're not saying that, Michael, but I'm just saying it's really hard to figure out how to get the right people to take the time to comment something on, and that's what the current peer review process organizes and imperfectly does.
I completely agree. I just think we could do a lot better at the way we do it. It's not that I think that is probably the single most valuable thing publishers do is find the right people to review papers, and I just think it's not done nearly as well as we could do it, which I think everybody would agree on, but more importantly, the way we record the decision. We take an incredibly multidimensional thing, the evaluation that someone has of a paper, who its audience is, and then basically reduce it to just does it go into this bin or not? It works, but it could work far, far, far better without the side effects.
Let's start with the realization that it doesn't work at all, at least in the life sciences.
Yes.
So I have the microphone. So I have two questions. One, I wondered what the panelists think of VTech's new F1000 research journal, which is basically, Michael, the model that we've been talking about, which is it's published, there's a publisher, they get people to peer review the content, but it is post-publication. And it is not waiting for people to just comment. It is a group of, it is the same model as now. You have a pool of peer reviewers, but it is post-publication. So that's my first question. And my second question is actually to you, Michael, specifically. Yes, the people in the room who have all the power to change how scholarly communication works are the authors, and most of those authors are at big institutions like Berkeley and Stanford. And it has been stunningly difficult to get institutions to change as a entity. And I'm interested to hear what your vision or dream or how you would like to see this come to fruition.
Anyone on the first? Or do you want to do this? Do you want me to take that first, and then we can answer the second? So
your microphone worked.
This one's easier. That one's. Okay. I think that it's certainly true that the biggest disappointment. So I can say what I want about the publishers' practice, but at least publishers are engaged in this issue and are thinking about how to do it. The biggest disappointment across the board has been universities, right? Universities who had people telling them in the 70s that the system of scholarly communication was unsustainable, that it was getting too expensive, that it doesn't work. They sat idly by as the internet happened. Yeah, it's unsustainability? Well, you certainly, I think the librarians might disagree about the sustainability of the current finances. But anyway, universities have had an interest in engaging in this issue and have been completely silent. And again, I don't think the main issue they should engage in is the financing of journals. It's basically they're just outsourcing their process of evaluating people to journals, and it's crazy. The fact that it still comes up today as the primary thing that gets discussed in tenure reviews and other things, where you're publishing your papers, without any or with much less mention about whether it was actually a good paper or an important paper, is insane to the extent to which it still happens. And that is something that I've seen almost no effort to tackle from amongst the universities. If they did that, then I think, I'm the first person to say that authors have been the big, have missed their chance to change the way, or continue to miss their chance to change the way publishing works. But the fact is, most authors feel like they're hemmed in by the system, and that they or their postdoc or somebody has a stake in publishing where their papers are. And even, I can argue to the end of the day why I think that's not true, but people feel that way. And the primary reason they feel that way is that the institutions that have hired them continue to send an unmistakable message to them that has to happen. They should change it. They should basically look so. Howard Hughes. Full disclosure, they pay my salary, so I have some. I like the way they do things, but they have you. They have you give your papers to them, and you don't just give your LCV. You pick 5 papers when you're up for evaluation. Your best 5 papers. People read them. They discuss them. There's relatively little emphasis placed on where they're published. We should shift to a system in which for example, the primary thing about how they decide whether you're good is people read your papers and comment on them, and there should be a blanket prohibition against discussing where they were published, because it doesn't matter. If you have people reading the papers who know what they're talking about, they're the best people in the best position to evaluate their work. It would be fighting against the tide of culture, but they could easily do it. They don't do it because it's more work, and they're pathologically afraid of making mistakes. So much so, that Berkeley, if you want to get anything from Berkeley, you have to get an offer from some other institute, right? Same Stanford, right? Universities they're even unwilling to make decisions relative to their own colleague institutions. Cannot fathom why they've let the system fester this way. It is such a disaster for the way things work. And really, universities have been the absolute worst people in this whole process.
Well, but you put your finger on it, and I think it's not just universities, but anyone out there, if you have a manuscript that's been accepted by science and accepted by the best open source journal in the world, where are you going to publish it? And I want one of you to tell me that you're going to turn science down.
Oh,
so
I've done it. I've been doing it for
Okay, we have one.
So I've been, since I started my lab, I've never published a paper in any of those journals, and I've done fine. So.
Yeah, but this is deeply ingrained, and it's not just universities giving people the direction. It's self-directed. It's the people in the tenure committees, and this is the heart of the matter. And when other people besides Michael are doing this on a regular basis, when that's accepted in terms of tenure and promotion, then the system will change.
But it won't change unless somebody has to push. It's probably the single changing the way universities function. I've not figured out how to do it, and I think it's really, really difficult thing to do. We should answer the other question, which is about Faculty of 1,000 research, which I think is great. I think that they're doing, there's always issues of implementation, but I think so far it looks great. You publish a paper, and then peer review happens afterwards, open, what the peer reviewer said, and if it gets a certain level of, it'll get into PubMed. There's sort of, it doesn't just, distinguishes between papers that have just been put up there to be reviewed and ones that have actually been reviewed and reviewed positively. And I think it implements many of the things that we should be doing in the way publishing works. It's awesome.
Hi, Tom Smith from Elsevier. I'm troubled by the hypothetical about the invention and the responses that we got here. And I guess this is to you, Michael, probably, because you came out and told us your answer. If somebody takes information that's available in the public domain and creates something novel and useful and valuable from it, shouldn't they have a right to profit from that?
That I was not answering. I'm not at all opposed to the idea of taking information that's been funded by the government. I'm not at all opposed to, I just sort of misconstrued what the question was. If you're taking information that's been funded by the government, that's been made available, and you do something with it, I'm all for that having intellectual property. That is, it's the people who are getting money from the government to do that, or generating data, where I don't think it should apply. all in favor. I'm not completely opposed to the notion of intellectual property. I think that it's precisely to enable that I think the information generated by the government should be in the public domain. It's so that I think universities have been very, very bad at taking the intellectual property that they generate and using it in the most effective way for the public good. And I think, certainly my friends in the biotech industry think that things like Bayh-Dole are bad for them because they make it much more difficult for them to get access to stuff that comes from universities. It's not fulfilling the system it wants. But I'm not saying that if you use government-funded information in the outside of the context of government funding, you shouldn't be able to generate intellectual property on it.
Well, and I'd go a little further than that. Right now, already, there's a huge problem with patent trolls. And if you open this up to say that there's a reserved right on these data, then you're opening 1,000 loopholes for anyone to come to say, my data published 5 years ago has relevance to this work, and therefore, invalidates the patent, or I need a huge payoff. This is a huge problem already. It is a huge disincentive for people who really want to go out and invent, and we have to be very careful with it.
Other questions?
Peter Mangiafico at Stanford. I was wondering if the panel would comment on Michael's sort of last slide, which is, can someone justify the sort of current state of affairs if you just could wipe the slate clean? What's the justification for the current state?
I'm hoping for silence.
Well, I'll jump in. Again, I'm not a publisher. Everything is about technology, process, and people, and the hardest part of that is the people. And we've talked about what does it take for people to feel very comfortable with this. In an ideal world, perhaps, there are a lot of agencies and methods that we would have that could be streamlined and made more efficient. And there's something to the vision that Michael puts forward. Getting from here to there, though, is not a simple matter. And it's not a simple matter of just simply saying we're going to abandon the structures that have worked for us and have done a pretty good job of vetting the science that's created. So I think really, if you want to envision that kind of future, you have to also envision a path to get there. It's not simple.
I guess I'm going to say pretty much the same thing. I think it's a useful exercise to try to imagine how you would build the world if you were starting from scratch. But there's an awful lot you have to build when you're doing that, right? But I guess I'm more interested in how we get from where we are now, having gotten here by a very complicated historical process. How do we make it better, right?
And my point in saying that is to define what we should make as our objective, right? If we start and say, well, 12-month embargoes are sort of an intrinsic part of this is one thing why I didn't like that, and I think it sort of reifies the idea that we have a 12-month embargo as the sort of law of the land, instead of saying our goal is to have no embargoes at all. Yeah, we're not there yet, for all sorts of reasons, and we might want to buffer the transition from here to there. But starting with a goal and saying that our objective is to make stuff available after 12 months, and that's what we're going to base policy on, you end up with a policy that makes things available in 12 months, rather than saying our objective is to make stuff available freely, because there's no intrinsic reason not to do it. We can fund it, we can do everything that way. Then you change just the way people function, and you change the goal. And that's why I think the exercise is useful. I agree, there's plenty of things that I think is probably less hard than people give it credit for, but there's some value in consistency and getting there quickly, but we'll get there more quickly if we make it clear that that's what our objective is, rather than acting as if it's somehow essential that we not do that.
We have time for one more question or so.
So I guess with the issue with publishing before peer review, it seems like that could open the door for papers that represent bad science. So I know we're all, or most of us are scientists here, and looking at it from the perspective of people who do good science, trying to publish good data, but there's a lot of crap that just goes out online. And one example would be the study that linked autism.
Crap is published.
I mean, yeah. Yes. I mean, like, when you look at the study that linked autism with vaccines, like, that was later debunked by a lot of people, but...
Published in a peer-reviewed journal, however.
Yeah, I know. But, like, even though that was eventually reviewed later and, like, shown to be poor science, a lot of people still believe in that, and it created a lot of problems for society. Like, what safeguards would we have that this door wouldn't become even more wide open if we open it up even more?
I mean, you want to take it first?
I was just going to say, I think the real situation is that the stuff. Let me talk about my own field, right? Everything's out there already, and then somehow it has to get sorted out what's worth paying attention to and what isn't, and we do it in various ways. Many of them imperfect, but not completely ineffective, but I think that's the real situation, is that we have to think about a world where everything is there, and we have to figure out how to evaluate it.
Technology will be ultimately the answer. I mean, it is a real viable concern when you talk about the multiple versions that may exist. Now, I don't actually come from a standpoint where I have a problem with that, but the problem could be if you do get a retracted paper and it gets retracted in one place, does that retraction pass on to every iteration and every repository that that article is? I mean, there are various initiatives in place like Crossmark, and these will probably start up in tandem with the measurement of usage in all of the places that these articles appear. And of course, early versions of this kind of thinking about stuff is the altmetric and impact story kind of roadmap that is in front of judging the impact from all the iterations of these articles. But I think technology will be the answer, and just what was said down there, that we will have to find a way of figuring out how to police this system.
I'd also note that we have one of the negative consequences of the current world in which so much emphasis is placed on pre-publication peer review and where a paper is published is that people have place undue value and confidence in that system, right? The reason why you keep hearing about that Wakefield paper on autism is it was in a peer-reviewed journal. You see this all the time with people referring to something as being in a peer-reviewed journal, as if the process of having 2 or 3 people read a paper in a often somewhat cursory fashion under time pressure, and then rendering a decision about whether it's appropriate for a journal, where there's lots of other things coming into the idea that is the end-all, get-all final word on whether a paper is good or bad is crazy. I mean, most of yes, there's some papers where you just read them instantaneously and they're garbage, but a lot of them, those are rarely the ones that are important, right? It's the ones that have an impact because they, on some level, seem like they might have been okay at first, and that opinion changes over time, where the current system is really very, very poorly suited to find those. So, plenty of cases of papers that have been fully retracted, where the journal and PubMed and everybody, it's clear that they are retracted, and yet they're still cited by people who should know better, just simply because they're a Nature paper or whatever. I mean, technology is great. It will solve some of this, but there needs to be more of an understanding amongst not just the public, but scientists as well, that the process of peer review is really just, even at its best, 3 people looking critically at a paper, thinking about its validity and importance at one point in time, and that the opinion of that changes dramatically often over time. It can change dramatically if different people are reading the paper. I think a lot of the problems we have with articles that are wrong when you read them getting through is not that the people weren't conscientious in peer review, but that people with the wrong expertise were reading it, to the question you were talking about before. I think that the future we should imagine is one in which peer review works better, because it changes over time. We have more people participating in the process. We just get rid of this, to me, paralyzing notion that the most important thing that happens is it a Nature paper or not, and get to a world where these things are flexible and dynamic and so forth. Travis.
I just want to add one thing to this. It's probably a little something more controversial comment, but I mean, I also think that we should get over the idea that even if the peer review system works well, that everything that's published is right. If you know, we're never going anywhere if that's the case. I mean, there ought to be things that should be.
Most of Einstein's papers were wrong, right? Like, I mean, it's like at the end of the day, like, I mean, I'm just saying that's how science works, and I completely agree. And the notion that what we're going to do is create a set of permanently approved facts that go into these peer-reviewed journals, and that there's a perfect filter that can do that, and that is just wrong, not just from a publishing standpoint, it's wrong from a scientific standpoint.
I just want to jump in and say something, kind of wrapping up a bit. I think you can envision a future without publishers. You can envision a future without libraries. But there are things some publishers, the good ones, do to really help disseminate the literature. That's important and shouldn't be lost, even if publishers go away. There are things libraries do, the good ones, to really help preserve that human knowledge that shouldn't go away. So while the institutions may evolve and may disappear, those functions really are critically important.
That sounds like a great way to end the morning session. Thank our speakers and panelists.